The smell of lighter fluid and cheap cologne always reminds me of June 2009. It was the summer the recession really dug its claws into Ohio, the kind of heat that stuck your shirt to your back and made the asphalt shimmer like a mirage. I was 22. My brother Julian was 24, and we were standing in my parents' backyard, surrounded by a lawn that was dying of thirst because my father refused to pay for a sprinkler system, watching Julian preen like a peacock in a polyester suit. It was a dual celebration, or so the invitation said. Julian had finally graduated from college after 6 years of finding himself, a journey that had cost my parents roughly $80,000. I, on the other hand, had just been promoted to lead diesel mechanic at Stan's Auto Body. I didn't have a degree. I had calluses, a permanent rim of grease under my fingernails, and a bank account that I built dollar by sweat-stained dollar. "We're just so proud," my mother gushed, clutching a glass of white wine that was sweating in the heat. She was looking at Julian. Always Julian. "He's going to be a marketing executive. Can you imagine?" I took a sip of my warm beer. "That's great, Ma." "It is great, Leo," my father corrected, stepping in. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, heavy and patronizing. "He's the first one in the family to get a degree. That's a legacy." I didn't point out that I had been paying rent to live in their basement for 2 years while Julian lived on campus for free. I didn't mention that I bought the groceries they were currently eating. I just nodded. "Yeah, legacy." The gifts were stacked on the patio table. Most were envelopes for Julian. A few were generic gift sets for me: cologne, a tie I'd never wear, a socket set from an uncle who actually knew what I did for a living. But there was something big in the driveway, covered by a tarp. I knew what it was. We all did. My parents had been whispering about it for weeks. They had taken out a second mortgage, a small one, they claimed, to launch Julian properly. They believed appearance was everything. If Julian was going to be an executive, he couldn't drive his rusted-out Civic. "Time for the big reveal," my dad announced, his face flushed with excitement. He led the small crowd of relatives to the driveway. Julian feigned surprise, putting a hand over his mouth in a gesture that was too theatrical to be real. Dad whipped the tarp off. It was a 2009 Toyota Camry. Pearl white, leather interior, sunroof. It wasn't a Ferrari, but in our neighborhood in 2009, it was a spaceship. It smelled like new rubber and possibility. "Oh my God," Julian shouted. He hugged Mom. He hugged Dad. He accepted the keys with a grin that split his face. "You guys are the best. Seriously, the best." My mother wiped a tear. "You deserve it, sweetie. You worked so hard." I stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling a cold, heavy stone settle in my gut. I wasn't jealous of the car. I was a mechanic. I knew Camrys were reliable, boring, and a pain to change the oil filter on. I was jealous of the gesture, the sheer, unadulterated investment in his future. Then my dad turned to me. "We didn't forget you, Leo," he said, beaming. "We know you've been working hard at the shop, too." He reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a small, colorful square. "Here," he said, handing it to me. "Feeling lucky?" It was a scratch-off ticket. A Lucky 7S ticket. Cost $5. The silence that followed was brief but deafening. My aunt coughed. My cousin looked at his shoes. Even Julian paused, his hand halfway to the door handle of his new car, looking a little embarrassed. "Thanks, Dad," I said. My voice didn't crack. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "It's a gag, mostly," my dad laughed, trying to fill the awkward air. "But hey, you never know, right? Besides, you're the mechanic. You can fix up your own truck." "Right," I said. "I can." My truck was a 1998 Ford Ranger with a transmission that slipped in second gear. I had bought it for $500 and rebuilt the engine myself. "Well, open it," my mom urged. "Let's see if you won $1." "I'll do it later," I said. "I'm gonna go check on the burgers." I walked away. I spent the rest of the party flipping meat and listening to Julian rev the engine of his new car. I watched them toast to his future. I watched my mother slip him a $50 bill for gas. I cleaned up the trash. I carried the recycling to the curb. By the time the last guest left, it was 9 p.m. The sun had finally given up, leaving a bruised purple sky. I went to my room in the basement. It smelled like damp concrete and the laundry detergent my mom used. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the creak of the floorboards upstairs as my parents and Julian laughed in the kitchen. I pulled the ticket out of my pocket. It was bent at the corner. Lucky 7S. Top prize. $1 million. Paid out as an annuity, or a lump sum of $650,000. Feeling lucky, I muttered to the empty room. I reached for the penny I kept on my nightstand. It was a 1943 steel penny my grandfather had given me. He was the only one who ever told me that working with your hands was honorable. I scratched the first line. Lemon, cherry, bar, nothing. I scratched the second line. Bell, horseshoe, nothing. I sighed. It was fitting. A losing ticket to cap off a losing day. I almost threw it away right then. I almost crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash can next to my desk where it would have been buried under gum wrappers and old receipts. But I'm a mechanic. I'm thorough. You don't tighten 3 lug nuts and ignore the 4th. I scratched the third line. 7. My heart did a little stutter step. 7. I stopped breathing. The room went dead silent. The laughter upstairs seemed to fade into a dull buzz like static on a radio. I scratched the third spot. 7. 3 sevens. I stared at it. I blinked, expecting the ink to change, expecting it to turn into a cherry or a lemon, but it stayed a 7. I moved my hand to the prize box. My fingers were shaking now, actually shaking. I had to grip the penny so hard it left an indentation in my thumb. I scratched. $1 million. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and run upstairs to shove it in their faces. I didn't do a victory dance. I froze. I sat there, completely paralyzed, while the world rearranged itself around me. $1 million. In 2009, in Ohio, that was enough to buy the whole neighborhood. It was enough to buy the dealership where Julian bought his Camry. But then a thought hit me. A cold, sharp realization that cut through the euphoria. If I went upstairs right now, if I ran into that kitchen and showed them this ticket, what would happen? My mother would scream. My father would cry. They would hug me. And then, within 10 minutes, the we would start. We won. We can pay off the house. We can pay off Julian's loans. We need a new roof. They would see this ticket as a family asset. They would guilt me. They would remind me that I lived under their roof, that they fed me, that we were a team. They would bleed this ticket dry until I was back to fixing transmissions for $15 an hour while Julian drove a Porsche. No. I slowly reached for my wallet. I took out my driver's license. I checked the expiration date. Valid. I took the ticket, folded it carefully inside a piece of notebook paper, and tucked it into the hidden pocket of my work boot, the one place nobody ever looked because it smelled like diesel and sweat. I needed to verify it. I couldn't go to the local gas station. The clerk, Old Man Henderson, was a gossip. If I scanned it there, the machine would sing the winter song, and by morning, the whole town would know. I needed an ally. I grabbed my keys. I walked upstairs. My mom looked up from the kitchen table, where she was counting the cash from Julian's graduation cards. "Going out, Leo?" she asked, barely looking at me. "Don't be too late. You have work tomorrow." "Yeah," I said. "Just gonna run to the shop. Forgot my torque wrench." "Okay. Oh, did you win anything on the ticket?" I stopped at the door. I looked at Julian, who was flipping through a brochure for car accessories. I looked at my dad, who was already half asleep in his recliner. "Nah," I said. "Just a dud, like usual." "Figured," she said. "Well, it's the thought that counts." "Yeah," I said. "It is." I walked out into the humid night, climbed into my beat-up Ford Ranger, and drove. But I didn't go to the shop. I went to Stan's house. Stan was my boss. He was 60 years old, divorced 3 times, and trusted nobody except his dog and his mechanics. He had a scanner in his home office because he ran a small lottery pool for the VFW. I pulled into his driveway at 10:15 p.m. The lights were off except for the blue glow of a TV in the living room. I knocked. Stan opened the door, wearing a stained undershirt and holding a can of Pabst Blue Ribbon. "Leo," he grunted. "The hell is wrong? Shop burned down?" "No, Stan," I said. "But I need you to check something for me. And I need you to promise on your mother's grave that you won't say a word." Stan looked at me. He saw the sweat on my forehead. He saw the way my hands were clenched. He stepped back and held the door open. "Get in here, kid," he said. "You look like you just saw a ghost." "I think I did," I said. "I think I saw my future." The scanner on Stan's desk was an ancient beige box that looked like it belonged in a Soviet bunker. But when I slid the ticket under the red laser, it let out a digital chime that sounded like a choir of angels singing through a tin can. "Valid claim. Contact Lottery Commission." Stan stared at the screen. He took a sip of his lukewarm PBR, burped softly, and then looked at me with eyes that had seen 3 wars and 2 ex-wives take everything he owned. "Well," Stan grunted, crushing the can in one hand, "you're a rich son of a bitch, Leo." "I don't feel rich," I said, my voice shaking. "I feel like I'm going to throw up." "Good. That means you're smart." Stan leaned forward, the springs of his recliner groaning. "Listen to me. You walk out that door, you go to a lawyer, not the guy your dad used for his DUI in '98. A real lawyer, in Columbus. Someone who costs $400 an hour and wears a suit that costs more than your truck." "I can't afford a lawyer like that." "I'll front you the cash," Stan said. He didn't hesitate. He reached for a coffee tin on his bookshelf, the one labeled Boat Fund, and popped the lid. He pulled out a wad of hundreds wrapped in a rubber band. $2,000. You pay me back when the check clears, with interest. I want a new lift for Bay 3. I looked at the money. I looked at Stan. My own father had given me a $5 scratch-off as a joke. My boss was handing me his life savings to protect my future. "Why?" I asked. "Because," Stan said, shoving the money into my chest, "if your family gets hold of this, you'll be broke in 3 years, and Julian will be driving a Ferrari while you're changing his oil. I've seen it happen. Money doesn't change people, Leo. It just magnifies who they already are." He was right. I took the money. "And Leo," Stan added, pointing a calloused finger at my face, "tomorrow morning you're at the shop at 7:55 a.m. You fix Mrs. Gable's transmission. You don't quit. You don't buy a watch. You don't smile too much. You act like you're still the guy who scrubs grease off his arms with lava soap." "I am that guy," I said. "Keep it that way." The next morning, June 15th, 2009, I woke up in the basement at 6:30 a.m. The house was quiet, except for the heavy thud of Julian's footsteps upstairs. He was probably getting up to start his day, which meant drinking coffee and browsing job boards for executive positions he wasn't qualified for. I pulled on my work boots. I hid the ticket, now wrapped in plastic and duct-taped inside the hollow leg of my metal bed frame, and went upstairs. My mom was at the stove, frying bacon. The smell was intoxicating, but my stomach was in knots. "Morning, honey," she said, not turning around. "There's coffee." "Thanks." Julian was sitting at the table, wearing a crisp button-down shirt. His new Camry keys were sitting on the placemat next to his plate, gleaming like a trophy. "Big day?" I asked, grabbing a piece of toast. "Interview," Julian said, checking his reflection in a spoon. "Marketing firm downtown. Entry level, but the growth potential is huge. They saw the car and asked if I was successful. Perception is reality, Leo." "Right," I said. "Good luck." "You still driving that rust bucket?" Julian asked, smirking. "You should ask Dad to help you trade it in. Maybe get something from this decade. It's embarrassing to have that thing in the driveway next to mine." I bit into the toast. It tasted like ash. I had a ticket downstairs worth $1 million. Well, $650,000 after the lump sum reduction, and maybe $400,000 after taxes. But still, I could buy 10 Camrys. I could buy the dealership. "It gets me from A to B," I said, "and it's paid off." "Suit yourself," Julian said, grabbing his keys. "Just don't park too close to me. I don't want door dings." I watched him leave. I watched my mom fawn over him, fixing his collar, telling him he looked like a CEO. She didn't ask me about work. She didn't ask if I needed gas money. I walked out to my Ranger. I drove to the shop. I spent 8 hours replacing a clutch on a 2002 Ford Focus. I bruised my knuckles. I got oil in my hair. And every time I paused to wipe the sweat from my eyes, I thought about the number 7. At lunch, I made a call. I used the payphone outside the shop, not my cell. I called a firm in Columbus that Stan had recommended, Vogel and Associates. I need to set up a blind trust, I told the receptionist, to claim a lottery prize. Her tone changed instantly, from bored to razor sharp. Can you come in tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Mr. Vogel has an opening. I'll be there. I went back to work. I asked Stan for the morning off. Sick day? He asked loudly for the benefit of the other mechanics. Yeah, stomach bug. Take some Pepto. See you Thursday. He winked. The drive to Columbus the next day was the longest 60 miles of my life. I wore my only suit, the one I'd bought for a cousin's wedding 3 years ago. It was tight in the shoulders and smelled faintly of mothballs. I had told my parents I was going to a training seminar for hybrid engines. They didn't ask for details. They just asked if I'd be home in time to mow the lawn. Mr. Vogel's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building that looked like it belonged on another planet compared to the brick and mortar of my hometown. The air conditioning was freezing. Mr. Vogel was a small man with glasses that magnified his eyes and a handshake that felt like gripping a pair of pliers. Sit down, Mr. Vance, he said. Let's see it. I pulled the ticket out of my pocket. I had taken it out of the bed frame that morning, my heart hammering against my ribs. Vogel inspected it. He checked the serial number. He scanned it with his own machine. Congratulations, he said, his face impassive. You have a life-changing amount of money. Or, if you're stupid, a life-ruining amount. I want to be smart, I said. Good. Here's how we do it. We form a trust. We call it something boring. The Blue Wrench Trust? Sure. I will act as the trustee. I will go to the lottery commission. I will claim the check. Your name appears nowhere on the public record. The check is deposited into the trust account, and then I wire the funds to an LLC we set up in your name. You control the LLC. And my family? I asked. Can they find out? Only if you tell them, Vogel said. Or if you start buying things you can't explain. The IRS will know. I will know. The bank will know. Your neighbors? They'll just think you're still the mechanic. How much will it cost? 5% of the winnings, plus a retainer. I slapped Stan's $2,000 on the desk. Start the paperwork. The waiting was the hardest part. It took 3 weeks for the claim to process. 3 weeks of living in the basement. 3 weeks of listening to Julian complain about how the job market is rigged because he didn't get the marketing gig. Turns out they wanted someone who knew how to use Excel, not just someone who drove a nice car. One night in early July, I came home late from the shop. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. She looked tired. The humidity had broken, leaving a cool, damp breeze blowing through the screen door. Hey, Ma, I said, grabbing a water from the fridge. Leo, she said, rubbing her temples, do you have any extra cash this week? I froze. Why? Your brother's insurance, she said, not meeting my eyes. It's higher than we thought, 'cause it's a sports sedan. And with the car payment, we're a little short on the electric bill. I stared at her. You want me to pay the electric bill so Julian can drive a car he can't afford? It's temporary, she snapped. Once he gets a job, he'll pay us back. He's your brother, Leo. We help family. We help family. That was the phrase, the hook, the guilt. I had $400,000 sitting in a pending trust account that was days away from clearing. I could have paid the electric bill for the next century. I could have paid off the car. But Stan's voice rang in my head. Money magnifies who they are. If I paid this bill, next month it would be the tires. Then the gas, then a vacation because Julian was stressed. I don't have it, Ma, I lied. Work's been slow. People aren't fixing their cars. They're just driving them into the ground. You have savings, she pressed. I know you do. You never spend anything. That's for my tools, I said. I need a new diagnostic computer. If I don't buy it, I can't work. She looked at me with pure disappointment. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was the look you give a dog that peed on the rug. Fine, she said, turning back to her calculator. We'll figure it out. Maybe Dad can pick up an extra shift. My dad was 62. He had a bad back. Maybe Julian can pick up a shift, I suggested. McDonald's is hiring. Don't be cruel, she hissed. He has a degree. I walked downstairs. I slammed the door to the basement. I sat on my bed, shaking with rage. They were willing to work my father into an early grave to protect Julian's ego. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Vogel. "Funds cleared. Check your secure email." I opened my laptop, a bulky Dell I'd bought used. I logged into the secure portal Vogel had set up. There it was. Account balance, $412,500. Taxes were a bitch, but it was still more money than I had ever seen. I looked at the number. I looked at the ceiling, imagining my mother upstairs, stressing over a $100 electric bill. I didn't transfer the money to my checking account. I didn't run upstairs. I opened a new tab. I searched for real estate auctions, Franklin County. If I was going to be rich, I wasn't going to be a rich kid living in a basement. I was going to be a landlord. But first, I had to solve the problem of the Camry. Because the next day, Julian came home with a dent in the bumper. A big one. "Someone hit me!" he screamed, storming into the house. "In the parking lot! They didn't leave a note!" He was lying. I could tell by the paint transfer. It was yellow, like a bollard at a drive-thru. "Dad!" Julian yelled. "You have to fix it! I can't drive it like this. It looks trashy." "I can't fix it, son," Dad said, his voice weary. "Bodywork is expensive." They both looked at me. I was standing in the doorway, covered in grease, holding a beer. "Leo," Dad said, "you know bodywork. Can you buff it out?" I looked at the dent. I looked at Julian, who was practically vibrating with entitlement. "Sure," I said. "I can fix it." "Thanks, bro," Julian said, tossing me the keys. "I need it by Friday. I have a date." I caught the keys. "It'll cost you," I said. "What?" Julian laughed. "I'm your brother." "Parts and labor," I said calmly. "Friends and family discount applies. $50 an hour, plus materials." "You're charging me?" Julian gasped. "Mom, Leo is charging me." "Leo," Mom warned. "Stan charges $80, I said. "I'm giving you a deal. Take it or leave it." Julian glared at me. "Fine, whatever. Just fix it." I took the keys. I walked out to the driveway. I sat in the driver's seat of the Camry. It smelled like vanilla air freshener and denial. I wasn't going to fix it. I was going to use it to get out. I started the engine. I put it in reverse. I had a plan, and it started with a foreclosure listing I had seen on the auction site for a duplex on the other side of town. Price, $60,000, cash only. I had cash, and I was done being the mechanic. It was time to become the owner. The Bondo dried fast in the July heat, smelling like chemical cherries and bad decisions. I spent 3 evenings in the driveway sanding the bumper of Julian's Camry. My hands were raw. I could have done it at the shop in 20 minutes with the pneumatic sander, but I wanted to do it here. I wanted them to see the work. I wanted Julian to watch me sweat over his mistake while he sat on the porch drinking iced tea and complaining about the humidity. "Is it almost done?" Julian asked on the third night, not looking up from his BlackBerry. "I have a networking event at the country club tomorrow. I can't drive a car with primer on it." I looked up, wiping dust from my safety goggles. "It'll be done when I paint it, and I paint it when you pay me." "I told you," Julian sighed, rolling his eyes like a teenager. "Mom said she'd cover the materials." "Mom isn't the one driving," I said, "and Mom didn't hit a yellow pole at a Wendy's drive-thru." He froze. "I didn't hit a pole," he lied. "Paint transfer doesn't lie, Julian. Yellow is safety bollard yellow. Just give me the cash." He grumbled, dug into his pocket, and slapped 3 crumpled $20 bills into my dusty hand. It wasn't the full amount, but it was enough to cover the paint. I didn't argue. I just pocketed the cash. $60 from a guy who thought he was a CEO, and went back to sanding. I had $412,000 in a checking account he didn't know about. The contrast was so sharp it almost made me dizzy. I was scraping for 60s while sitting on a fortune, all to maintain the illusion that I was still just Leo, the grease monkey. The next morning, I called in sick to the shop again. Stan knew. He didn't ask questions. "Don't buy anything stupid," was all he said before hanging up. I put on a baseball cap, sunglasses, and my cleanest pair of jeans. I drove the Ranger to the county courthouse steps in downtown Columbus. It was auction day. The foreclosure list was taped to a pillar, flapping in the hot wind. There were about 30 people there. Most looked like sharks, guys in cheap suits with Bluetooth headsets, property flippers looking to make a quick buck on someone else's misery. The recession had created a buffet for them. I stood in the back, leaning against a stone lion, trying to look invisible. "Item number 402, the auctioneer droned, his voice amplified by a crackling speaker. 1402 Oak Street, duplex, 2 units, 2 bed, 1 bath each, as is. Where is?" I knew the house. I had driven past it 3 times at night. It was ugly. The siding was a peeling shade of avocado green. The porch sagged on the left side, and the lawn was a jungle of dandelion and crabgrass. But the foundation was solid stone. The roof was slate, expensive to fix but lasted forever. And it was 3 blocks from the university hospital. Nurses needed rent. Doctors needed rent. "Opening bid is $30,000, the auctioneer said. "30, a guy in a polo shirt shouted. "35, another guy countered. 40. My heart was hammering against my ribs, harder than when I scratched the ticket. This was real. This wasn't luck. This was strategy. 45, the polo shirt guy said. The bidding stalled. The crowd murmured. The house was a dump, and in 2009, cash was tight. Nobody wanted a project. They wanted turnkey. "Going once at 45, the auctioneer said. I raised my hand. I felt like I was lifting 1,000 pounds. 50, I said. Heads turned. They saw the mechanic in the work boots and the stained hat. They looked confused. Who was this kid? 55, the polo shirt guy sneered, looking me up and down. 58, I said. It was a specific number. It was exactly what I had calculated the renovation budget would allow while keeping $100,000 in reserve for emergencies. The polo shirt guy hesitated. He looked at his clipboard. He shook his head. "Too much work," he muttered. "Going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman in the Ford hat for $58,000. I walked up to the clerk. I handed her a cashier's check from Blue Wrench Trust. She stamped the paper. Paid. I owned a house. I walked back to my truck, my legs feeling like jelly. I sat in the cab for 10 minutes, just breathing. I owned a house, a whole building, and nobody knew. Now came the hard part, the exit strategy. I couldn't just move out and say I bought a place. My parents would ask where I got the money. They would want to see it. They would want to move Julian in to help me out with the mortgage. I needed a lie, a good one. I drove home. It was 4 p.m. Julian's Camry was gone, probably at the country club, but my dad's car was in the driveway. I walked into the kitchen. My mom was sitting at the table, staring at a stack of envelopes. The electric bill, the water bill, and a new one, credit card delinquency notice. She looked up, her eyes red. "Leo," she said, her voice cracking. "Thank God you're home. The dryer is making a noise. Can you look at it? And we need to talk about rent." I stood there, holding a cold bottle of water. "I can look at the dryer," I said. "But I can't give you rent this month." Her face fell. It crumbled. "What?" "Leo, you promised. We're counting on that 300. Your father's hours got cut again." "I can't give it to you," I said, taking a breath, "because I'm moving out." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. "Moving out?" she whispered. "Where? You can't afford an apartment. You make mechanic wages." "I got a job," I lied. "A second job. There's a landlord downtown. Old guy. He owns a duplex on Oak Street. It's a wreck. He needs someone to live in one of the units and fix it up in exchange for free rent. Just pay utilities." It was the perfect lie. It played into their perception of me. Leo the fixer. Leo the laborer. Leo who lives in a dump because he works with his hands. "Free rent?" my dad asked, walking into the room. He looked hopeful. "Yeah, but the place is a disaster," I added quickly. "No heat, lead paint. I have to gut it. It's not safe for visitors." I had to plant that seed early. I didn't want them coming over. "But Leo," my mom said, panic rising in her voice, If you move out, who's going to buy the groceries? Who's going to help with the bills here? I'm 22, Ma, I said. Julian is 24. He has a degree. He has a car. Maybe he can chip in. He's looking for work, she snapped. He needs support right now, not pressure. You're abandoning us when we're drowning. I'm not abandoning you, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my chest hurt. I'm growing up. I'll still come by to fix the cars. I'll still help when I can, but I can't live in the basement forever. You're selfish, she said. The word hung in the air. Selfish. I thought about the $58,000 I just spent. I thought about the $400,000 sitting in the bank. I could write them a check right now and solve every problem they had. But if I did, Julian would never work a day in his life. My dad would buy a boat. My mom would renovate the kitchen. And in 5 years, we'd all be broke again. Maybe, I said. I'm gonna go pack. I spent the night throwing my clothes into garbage bags. I packed my tools, my real assets. I packed the few books I owned. When I came upstairs the next morning, the house was quiet. My parents were in their bedroom with the door closed. Julian was asleep. I loaded the Ranger. It sagged under the weight of my tool chest. As I was backing out, Julian walked out onto the porch in his boxers, scratching his stomach. He looked at my truck, piled high with junk. Finally moving out of the dungeon? He called out, smirking. Yeah. Where to? Some shack? Something like that, I said. Did you like the paint job on the bumper? He glanced at his Camry. It was perfect. I had blended the pearl white flawlessly. It's fine, he said dismissively. Hey, since you're saving money on rent now, think you could spot me a 20 for lunch? I'm meeting a headhunter. I looked at him. I looked at the brother who got the degree, the car, the praise, and the help. Check the glove box, I said. Really? He lit up. Yeah, I left the receipt for the paint in there. You can frame it. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I didn't look back. I drove straight to Oak Street. The duplex looked even worse in the daylight. The grass was knee-high. The front door had a hole in it where a deadbolt used to be. A stray cat was sitting on the porch railing, judging me. I parked the truck. I unlocked the door with the key the clerk had given me. The smell hit me first. Stale beer, mildew, and old carpet. The previous owners had left in a hurry. There was trash everywhere. The walls were a terrifying shade of beige. It was disgusting. It was mine. I walked into the center of the living room. I put my tool chest down. Clang. I took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fixing someone else's mess. I wasn't patching a tire for a customer or painting a bumper for my brother. I was building my own empire. I pulled my phone out. I called Stan. I'm in, I said. Good, Stan grunted. Now don't get soft. You need a dumpster, and you need a lawyer for the evictions. Evictions? Yeah. The listing said vacant, but I drove by last night. There's lights on in the upper unit. You got squatters, kid. My stomach dropped. Squatters. I looked up at the ceiling. I heard a faint thud. Footsteps. Great. I had $1 million in the bank, a falling down house, a family that hated me for leaving, and now I had strangers living upstairs. I walked back to the truck and grabbed my crowbar. Not to use it, just to hold it. I walked up the stairs to the second unit. I knocked. Police! A voice shouted from inside. We ain't open! I'm not the police! I shouted back. I'm the landlord, and rent is due! This was going to be a long summer. The door at the top of the stairs didn't have a knob. It had a rag stuffed into the hole where the hardware used to be, and the wood around the frame was splintered, like someone had tried to kick it in a few times before giving up. I stood there, gripping the cold steel of my crowbar. Open up, I said again. Silence. Then, the shuffle of heavy boots. The rag was pulled out. An eye appeared in the hole. It was bloodshot, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from sleeping with one ear open for the cops. You the bank? The voice rasped. No, I said. I'm the guy who bought the bank's problem. Open the door or I take the hinges off. I have the tools. The deadbolt slid back. There was a deadbolt on the inside. The door swung open. The man standing there wasn't a monster. He was maybe 50, skinny as a rail, wearing a stained undershirt and holding a lit cigarette that smelled like burning plastic. Behind him, the apartment was a wreck. Mattresses on the floor, fast food wrappers, a camping stove set up on a stack of bricks. "Name's Silas," he said, blowing smoke into the hallway. "And unless you have a sheriff with you, I ain't moving. Squatters' rights. Look it up." I didn't blink. I knew the law. In Ohio, eviction took 30 days minimum. If he fought it, 3 months. I couldn't have a junkie living above me while I tried to renovate. It was a liability. "I know the law," I said, stepping inside. I didn't ask permission. I just walked in, owning the space. "And I know that this building has been condemned for electrical hazards. If I call the fire marshal, he condemns it tonight. You're on the street in an hour." Silas narrowed his eyes. "You wouldn't." "Try me." I looked around the room. "But I don't want to do that. I'm a reasonable guy." "You want rent?" He laughed. "I got lint and a half-pack of Camels." "I don't want rent," I said. "I want labor." I pointed to the wall separating the kitchen from the living room. It was load-bearing, but the plaster was crumbling. "I need this place gutted," I said. "Down to the studs, drywall, lath, carpet, all of it into the dumpster out back. You help me do it, and I let you stay for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, I give you $500 cash to find a new place." Silas stared at me. He looked at the crowbar. He looked at his hands. "500? Cash," I said. "And I buy lunch. Pizza. Every day." He took a drag of the cigarette. The tension in his shoulders dropped about an inch. "Deal," he said. "But I ain't moving the toilet. That's gross." "I'll move the toilet," I said. So, I had a crew. For the next 14 days, I lived a double life that would have killed a weaker man. By day, I was at Stan's shop, changing oil and rotating tires, listening to customers complain about the recession. By night, I was at the duplex, wearing a respirator mask, swinging a sledgehammer alongside a squatter named Silas. We tore that place apart. We ripped up shag carpet that smelled like 1978. We pulled down plaster that crumbled into white dust, coating us like ghosts. We hauled cast iron radiators down the stairs, sweating through our clothes until we looked like we'd been swimming. And honestly, it was the best I had felt in years. There is a specific kind of peace in demolition. You take something broken and you strip it down to the truth. The duplex had good bones, oak beams, copper pipes, mostly. It just needed someone to care about it. My family, on the other hand, was rotting from the inside out. It was mid-August when my mom called the shop. "Leo," she said. Her voice was tight. "Are you working?" "Yeah, Ma. I'm under a Subaru. What's up?" "It's Julian. He has a situation." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Did he hit another pole?" "No, he has an interview. A really big one. With a pharmaceutical sales company. But the Camry, the air conditioning stopped working. And his suit. He can't show up sweating, Leo. It's unprofessional." "Take it to the dealer," I said. "It's under warranty." "It's not," she whispered. "The warranty was voided. He tried to install a custom stereo himself. He cut a wire harness." I closed my eyes. Of course he did. He probably watched a YouTube video and thought he was an engineer. "Bring it in," I said. "I'll look at it." An hour later, the pearl-white Camry rolled into the lot. It looked different. Dirty. There were fast food bags piled in the back seat. The new car smell was gone, replaced by the scent of stale French fries and desperation. Julian got out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing basketball shorts and a stained t-shirt. He looked heavier. "Fix it," he said, tossing me the keys. "I need it by tomorrow morning." "Hello to you too," I said. I popped the hood. It was a rat's nest. He had spliced into the main harness with electrical tape and a pair of dull scissors. He had blown the compressor relay and melted a fuse block. "This is $1,000 fix," I said. "Parts alone." "I don't have $1,000, Julian shouted. "I haven't worked in 3 months. The market is impossible." "Get a job at Target," I said. "They're hiring." "I am an executive," he screamed. "I am not stocking shelves." My dad got out of the passenger side. He looked old, defeated. He walked over to me, avoiding my eyes. "Leo," he said softly. Please, just patch it, just so he can get to the interview. Dad, I said, if I patch it, it's gonna catch fire. The wiring is shot. We can pay you, Dad said. Mom pawned her grandmother's ring. I froze. The ruby ring. The one she said was going to be for my future wife. The one she swore she would never take off. She pawned the ring? I asked. For the electric bill, Dad admitted. And for gas. Julian drives a lot. Networking. Networking. Driving around aimlessly, pretending to be busy. I looked at the Camry. It wasn't a car anymore. It was a leech. It was sucking them dry, one tank of gas at a time. Keep the money, I said. I'll fix it. But this is the last time. Tell Julian if he touches the wiring again, I'm cutting the battery cables. I fixed it. I stayed late at the shop, rewiring the harness while Stan watched from the office door. You're enabling them, Stan said, sipping his coffee. I know, I said, but I'm buying time. For what? For the duplex to start paying me back. I finished the car at 9 p.m. I drove it to their house. I left the keys in the mailbox. I didn't go inside. I didn't want to see the empty spot on my mother's finger. I drove back to Oak Street. Silas was waiting on the porch. He had his duffel bag packed. The 2 weeks were up. Place looks good, Silas said. For a dump. Thanks, I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out an envelope. Inside was $500 and an extra 100. Bonus, I said. For the radiators. Those were heavy. Silas took the money. He counted it. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the man he used to be before life chewed him up. You're a good kid, he said. Don't let this place turn you into a prick. Landlords are mostly pricks. I'll try, I said. He walked away into the night. I was alone. I walked into the downstairs unit. It was finished. New drywall, fresh paint, a neutral gray, classy. I had refinished the hardwood floors myself. The kitchen had cheap but clean appliances I bought at a scratch and dent sale. It looked like a home. I took pictures with my flip phone. I posted an ad on Craigslist that night. Newly renovated 1-bed/1 bath, near hospital, quiet building, $750 per month, no pets. The next morning, my phone blew up. Nurses, residents, people with steady jobs who needed a clean place to sleep. I showed it to a woman named Sarah. She was an ER nurse. She walked in, saw the clean floors, saw the new locks, and handed me a check for the deposit and first month's rent on the spot. Milano Elfu Tano Dola. I held the check. It wasn't $1 million. It was barely a fraction of what I had in the bank. But it felt heavier. It felt real. This was money that would come every single month, whether I scratched a ticket or not. I deposited it into the Blue Wrench trust account. Then I did the math. With Sarah's rent covering the taxes and utilities, my living expenses were zero. I was living for free. I called Vogel. What's the balance? I asked. $408,000, Vogel said. You spent some on materials. There's another auction next week, I said. The house next door to the duplex, 1404 Oak Street. It's boarded up. You want to buy it? I want the block, I said. Leo, Vogel warned, slow down. You're moving fast. I have to, I said. My brother just voided his warranty. The clock is ticking. I bought the second house, $42,000. Cash. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Julian. September came. I was working at the shop when Julian showed up again. This time he was walking. Leo, he said, standing in the bay door. He looked manic. I got it. Got what? The job. I got the job. The pharma sales? No, he said, waving a hand. Better. It's direct marketing, energy drinks, Verve. You buy in, you get a team, and you get a percentage of their sales. It's passive income, Leo. I'm going to be rich. I stopped turning the wrench. A pyramid scheme. Julian, I said, that's a scam. You have to buy the inventory up front. It's an investment, he shouted. Mom and Dad gave me the $5,000 for the starter kit. I'm picking up the cases today. My wrench clattered to the floor. $5,000? I asked. Where did they get $5,000? They took a title loan, Julian said, grinning. On the house. But it doesn't matter. I'll pay it back in a month. I'm gonna need to use your truck, though. The Camry. Well, the suspension is acting up. Too much weight with the samples. He wanted to borrow my truck to haul his scam energy drinks, financed by a title loan on the house I grew up in. I looked at him. I looked at the brother who was drowning our parents and calling it swimming. No, I said. What? No, you're not using my truck. But I need it. Rent a U-Haul, I said, with your executive salary. You're jealous, he spat. You're just a mechanic and you can't stand that I'm an entrepreneur. Get out of my shop, I said. He stormed off. I watched him go. Then I picked up my phone. I called the county clerk. I need to check a lien, I said. On a property at 422 Maple Drive. I waited. Yes, the clerk said. A secondary lien was recorded yesterday, $5,000. High-interest lender. Is the primary mortgage current? I asked. One moment. No, it's 60 days past due. My blood ran cold. They weren't just broke. They were losing the house, and they had just taken out a predatory loan to buy energy drinks. I hung up. I looked at the lucky sevens penny I still kept in my pocket. It was time to stop fixing cars. It was time to buy the debt. October 2009 tasted like ash and cheap turkey. The recession wasn't just a headline anymore. It was a physical weight pressing down on the roof of 422 Maple Drive. I sat in Mr. Vogel's office, staring at a stack of legal documents that were about to change the power dynamic of my family forever. Are you sure about this, Leo? Vogel asked. He peered over his spectacles, his fingers resting on a cashier's check from the Blue Wrench Trust for $112,000. The bank is selling the note at a discount, I said, my voice flat. It's a non-performing asset. They want it off their books before the fiscal year ends. I'm doing them a favor. You're buying your parents' mortgage, Vogel corrected. You aren't paying it off. You're becoming the lender. That means if they don't pay, and we know they can't, you have to foreclose. You have to be the one to kick them out. If the bank keeps it, they're on the street by Christmas, I said. If I hold the note, I control the timeline. It's messy, Leo. Life is messy. Just buy the debt. Vogel sighed. He stamped the papers. Assignment of mortgage. Transfer of lien. It was done. I walked out of that office not as a son, but as the primary creditor of the Vance household. I didn't feel powerful. I felt sick. But it was the only way to catch them when they inevitably fell. And the fall was happening fast. I drove to my parents' house a week later. It was a Tuesday evening. The sun was setting early now, casting long, skeletal shadows across the lawn that hadn't been mowed in a month. The garage door was open. Inside, where my father's tools used to be organized on pegboards, was a wall of cardboard boxes. Verve Energy, the pyramid scheme Julian had bet the farm on. Cases were stacked 5 feet high. Some were crushed at the bottom, leaking neon green syrup onto the concrete. The smell was cloying. Sugar, caffeine, and failure. Julian was sitting in a lawn chair in the middle of it, wearing a headset, talking fast. Bro, listen, it's about the downline. You buy 10 cases, you get 3 guys to buy 10 cases. No, it's not a scam. It's multi-level marketing. It's the future of retail. He saw me. He clicked the headset off. Leo, he said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. Coming to invest? I have a promo this week. Buy 2 cases, get a free t-shirt. I'm good, I said, kicking a leaking can with my work boot. How's business? Booming, Julian lied. Just waiting on some checks to clear. Cash flow is tight in the startup phase, you know? Bezos went through it. Gates went through it. Bezos didn't finance Amazon with a title loan on his parents' house, I said. Julian's face darkened. Mom told you. Yeah, she did. It's temporary. Once the regional manager bonus kicks in, I'm paying it off. Double. Julian, I said, stepping closer. The loan is 300% APR. You owe $15,000 on a $5,000 principal by next year. You're not paying anything off. You're drowning them. You're just jealous, he spat, standing up. You're living in some slum downtown, fixing toilets, and I'm building an empire. Get out of my warehouse. Your warehouse is Dad's garage, I said, and it smells like antifreeze. I left. I went inside. My mom was in the kitchen. She wasn't cooking. She was sitting in the dark, staring at the phone. Who's calling? I asked, flipping the light switch. She flinched. Nobody, just telemarketers. It's the bank, isn't it? She crumbled. They say we're 3 months behind, she whispered. They sent a notice of default. They say they're going to auction the house in January. She didn't know. She didn't know the bank had already sold the debt to Blue Wrench Trust. She didn't know the bank calling her was actually a servicing company I had hired through Vogel to keep up appearances until I was ready. What about the money from the ring? I asked. Or the title loan? Julian needed it, she sobbed. Inventory, marketing materials. He said it was the only way to unlock the diamond tier earnings. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had handed me a scratch-off ticket as a joke, while handing my brother the keys to a future he hadn't earned. I can't help you, Ma, I said. I'm broke. My landlord raised the rent. Can't you ask Stan for an advance? She begged. Just $2,000 to keep the lights on? Stan fired me. I lied. Said I was taking too many personal days to fix Julian's car. Her eyes went wide. Oh, Leo. Oh, no. I'm working day labor now, I said. Roofing. It pays cash, but it's inconsistent. We're cursed, she whispered. This family is cursed. It's not a curse, Ma, I said, grabbing a glass of water. It's math. Thanksgiving arrived like a funeral procession. November 26th, 2009. I drove the Ranger over. The bed was empty. No tools, no gifts. Just me. I wore a flannel shirt with a hole in the elbow. Theatrics. The house was cold. They had turned the thermostat down to 62. My dad was wearing a coat inside. Julian was wearing his suit jacket, trying to look dignified while shivering. The feast was a supermarket turkey breast, instant mashed potatoes, and a can of cranberries. No wine. No pie. We sat in silence. The only sound was the scraping of forks against cheap plates. So, Julian said, clearing his throat. I'm pivoting. Nobody looked up. The energy drink market is saturated, he continued, undeterred. But I met a guy online. Forex trading. Currency exchange. It's high risk, high reward. I just need a small seed capital to buy the software. My dad dropped his fork. Clatter. Julian, Dad said. His voice was a husk. We have no money. The bank called again today. They're coming for the house. They're bluffing, Julian scoffed. Banks don't want houses. They want cash. We just stall them until my Forex plays hit. They aren't bluffing, I said quietly. What do you know? Julian snapped. You're a roofer. I know that foreclosure takes about 90 days from the notice of default, I said, and you got that notice in August. It's November. Stop being negative, Mom cried. It's Thanksgiving. We should be grateful. Grateful for what? I asked. The car? I pointed out the window. The Camry was in the driveway. It looked rough. It hadn't been washed in weeks. A tire was low. The car is fine, Julian said. I'm actually thinking of trading it in for a BMW. Better image for a trader. Then we saw the lights. Amber, flashing lights. Not police. Not ambulance. Tow truck. A massive flatbed backed into the driveway. The air brakes hissed, a sound I knew intimately from the shop. A guy in a reflective vest jumped out. He wasn't polite. He didn't knock. He hooked chains to the Camry's rear axle in about 30 seconds. Hey! Julian screamed. Hey, what are you doing? He ran outside, napkin still tucked into his shirt. My parents followed. I stayed at the table, taking a bite of instant potatoes. They were cold. I watched through the window. Julian was yelling at the driver. The driver ignored him, engaging the winch. The pearl-white Camry, the symbol of the legacy, was dragged up the ramp, scraping its bumper, the one I had sanded for 3 days, against the asphalt. My mom was crying, holding onto my dad's arm. My dad just stared, looking like a man watching his life drain away. I walked outside. "He can't take it!" Julian yelled at me. "Do something! You're a mechanic! Unhook it!" "It's a repo, Julian," I said. "You stopped making payments." "Mom was supposed to pay it!" Julian shouted, turning on her. "You said you handled it!" "I paid the electric bill," Mom wailed. "I had to choose." "You chose wrong!" Julian screamed. "How am I supposed to get to meetings? How am I supposed to be an executive without a car?" The driver finished securing the chains. He handed Julian a slip of paper. "Toyota Financial Services," the driver grunted. "You want it back? Pay the arrears plus towing and storage. About $3,000. Cash." He climbed into the cab. The truck rumbled. And just like that, the Camry was gone. The driveway was empty, save for a few oil stains and the ghost of a celebration from June. We stood there in the cold. "Well," I said, putting my hands in my pockets, "Happy Thanksgiving." "Don't," my dad said. He turned to me, and for the first time I saw anger in his eyes directed at me. "Don't you dare stand there and judge us. You didn't help. You moved out. You hoarded your money." "My money?" I laughed. "I make $12 an hour, Dad, remember?" "You could have stayed," Mom yelled. "You could have paid rent. We wouldn't be in this mess if you hadn't abandoned the family." There it was. The blame. Even as Julian stood there, the architect of their ruin, they turned on me because I was the one who refused to sink with the ship. "I didn't buy the car," I said. "I didn't take out the title loan, and I didn't fill the garage with sugar water." "Get out!" Julian hissed. "Just get out, Leo. Nobody wants you here." "Fine," I said, "but you might want to start packing." "Why?" Mom asked, trembling. "Because," I said, walking toward my rusty Ford Ranger, "winter is coming, and banks don't care about Christmas." I drove away. I didn't go to my duplex. I went to the second house I had bought, the one next door. I had finished renovating it last week. It was empty, warm, secure. I sat on the floor of the living room, listening to the silence. My phone rang. It was Vogel. "Leo?" he said. "The servicing company just updated the file. Your parents missed the cure deadline. You have the right to foreclose immediately." "Do it," I said. "Leo, it's Thanksgiving." "I know," I said. "Post the notice on the door tomorrow. 422 Maple Drive is now property of the Blue Wrench Trust." "And the occupants?" Vogel asked. "Evict them," I said. "But Vogel?" "Yeah?" "Make sure the eviction date is January 1st. I'm not a monster. I'll give them Christmas." I hung up. I looked at the scratch-off penny in my hand. It was dull now, the copper worn down to the steel core. I wasn't the mechanic anymore. I wasn't the son. I was the landlord, and rent was due. December in Ohio doesn't forgive mistakes. It freezes them. By Christmas Eve, 2009, the snow was piled 3 feet high against the siding of 422 Maple Drive. The house looked like a tomb. There were no lights, no wreath, just an orange sticker plastered to the front door by the sheriff's department, bright and violent against the peeling white paint. "Notice to vacate. Property of the Blue Wrench Trust. Date, January 1st, 2010. I pulled my Ranger into the driveway. I hadn't been invited. In fact, my mother had stopped calling me 2 weeks ago when the foreclosure was finalized. She was too ashamed, or maybe she was just too busy packing 30 years of accumulation into cardboard boxes labeled kitchen and Julian's trophies. I walked up the steps. My boots crunched on the ice. I didn't knock. I had a key. I owned the lock, after all. The living room was stripped. The furniture was gone, sold on Craigslist, or hauled away by creditors. My parents were sitting on folding chairs near the fireplace where a single Duraflame log was burning. Julian was sitting on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, staring at a laptop that was running on battery power. They looked up when I entered. "Leo," my mom whispered. She looked hollow. We didn't think you'd come. It's Christmas Eve, I said, shaking the snow off my coat. I brought dinner. I set a bucket of fried chicken on the floor. It smelled like grease and salt, the smell of survival. We're not hungry, Julian muttered. We're losing the house, Leo, in case you didn't notice. I noticed, I said. I saw the sticker. The Blue Wrench Trust, my dad said, spitting the words out like poison. Vultures. That's what they are. Buying up debt and kicking families onto the street in the dead of winter. It's legal, I said. It's immoral, Julian shouted. If I could just find out who runs this trust, I'd sue them. I'd sue them for emotional distress. I'd bury them. With what money? I asked. The energy drink money? Julian stood up. The blanket fell off him. He was wearing the same suit pants he'd worn to his graduation party in June, but now they were frayed at the hems. You think you're so smart, he sneered. Just because you have a job. You're a laborer, Leo. You'll always be a laborer. At least I took a shot at greatness. Greatness, I repeated. Is that what we're calling the repo man? Stop it, Mom cried. Please, it's our last night in this house. Don't fight. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. We have nowhere to go, Leo. Your aunt won't take us. The credit check failed for the apartment complex. We're going to a shelter on Tuesday. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had given me a $5 scratch-off and told me to fix my own truck while they bought a Camry for the golden child. I looked at the parents who had mortgaged their future to fund a pyramid scheme. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a document. It wasn't a check. It was a lease agreement. You don't have to go to a shelter, I said. My dad looked up, confused. What? I know a landlord, I lied. He has a unit open. It's small. 2 bedrooms downtown. It's clean. He's willing to overlook the credit score if you have a cosigner. Who? Mom asked, hope flaring in her eyes like a match. Me, I said. I'll cosign, but there are conditions. Anything, Dad said. We'll do anything. First, I said, looking at Julian. The lease is for 2 occupants, Mark and Linda Vance. Julian froze. What about me? He asked. You're 25, I said. You have a degree. You have legs. You're not on the lease. You can't do that, Julian screamed. Mom, he's kicking me out. Mom looked at me, then at Julian. She looked at the cold fireplace. She looked at the bucket of chicken. Leo, she pleaded. He has nowhere to go. He can go to the shelter, I said. Or he can get a job, any job, but he's not living with you. He's the reason you're in this chair. That's not fair, Julian yelled. Life isn't fair, I said. You told me that when I got the scratch-off ticket, remember? It's just a gag, you said. I paused. The room went quiet. Speaking of the ticket, I said. I reached into my other pocket. I pulled out the penny, the steel penny from 1943, and I pulled out a photocopy of the winning ticket I had kept in my wallet for 6 months. I unfolded it. Lucky Sevens, I read. Top prize, $1 million. I handed the paper to my father. He took it. His hands were shaking. He squinted at the photocopy in the dim light of the fire. What is this? He whispered. That's the ticket you gave me, I said. In June, for graduation. But you said it was a loser. I lied. Julian snatched the paper from Dad's hand. He stared at it. His eyes bulged. You won? He gasped. You won $1 million? $650,000 actually, I said. After the lump sum. Then taxes took a chunk, left me with about $400,000. You have $400,000? Mom whispered. She looked like she was going to faint. And you let us lose the house? I didn't let you lose it, I said. I bought it. Silence. Absolute vacuum-sealed silence. What? Julian breathed. I bought the debt, I said. I own the mortgage. I am the Blue Wrench Trust. Blue for the collar you made fun of. Wrench for the tool I used to fix your mistakes. My dad stood up. He looked at me with a mixture of horror and awe. You foreclosed on us? I stopped the bleeding, I said. If the bank had kept it, they would have sued you for the deficiency judgment. They would have garnished your pension, Dad. I didn't. I just took the house. You have money, Julian said. His voice was trembling. You have money right now. You could pay off the debt. You could give us the house back. We could start a business, a real one. I laughed. It was a cold sound bouncing off the empty walls. Julian, I said, I watched you blow $80,000 on college. I watched you blow 30 grand on a car. I watched you blow 5 grand on energy drinks. If I gave you this money, you'd burn it in a week. I'm your brother. And I'm your landlord, I said, starting January 1st. I pointed to the lease in my hand. This is for the downstairs unit of the duplex on Oak Street. I own that too. Rent is $700 a month. I'll take it out of your pension, Dad, directly. That way Julian can't spend it on marketing materials. Huh? My mom was crying again, but it wasn't the frantic crying of before. It was the quiet sobbing of someone who realizes the game is over. You tricked us, she whispered. I saved you, I corrected her. I'm giving you a roof. I'm giving you heat. I'm giving you a chance to retire without a leech attached to your bank account. I looked at Julian. Get your stuff, I said. You have until midnight to be out of the county, or I file a trespassing charge, and since I own the property, I'll win. Mom! Julian screamed. Do something! Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the lease. He looked at the signature line. He took a pen from his pocket. He signed. Dad, Julian whispered. Go, son, Dad said. He didn't look up. He's right. We can't afford you anymore. Julian stood there for a long minute. He looked at me with pure hate. He looked at the photocopy of the ticket on the floor. I hate you, he said. I know, I said. Don't scratch the paint on the way out. Julian grabbed his laptop. He grabbed a duffel bag. He walked out the front door into the snow. I watched him go. He didn't have a car. He didn't have a plan. He was walking toward the main road, his suit jacket flapping in the wind. For the first time in his life, he was on his own. I turned back to my parents. Pack the rest, I said. I brought the truck. We can move the boxes tonight. We worked in silence. We loaded the Ranger. We drove to Oak Street. I unlocked the downstairs unit. It was warm. I had turned the heat on 3 hours ago. The floors gleamed. The fridge was stocked with actual groceries, milk, eggs, vegetables. It's small, Mom said, looking around. It's yours, I said, as long as you pay the rent. I handed Dad the keys. I'm upstairs, I said, in the other unit. If something breaks, call me, but don't come up without calling first. I have boundaries now. Leo, Dad said, catching my arm as I turned to leave. The ticket? The money? Is it really real? I pulled the penny out again. Yeah, Dad, it's real. Why didn't you tell us? Because, I said, opening the door to the snowy night. You would have bought a new Camry, and I wanted to buy a future. I walked upstairs to my unit. I locked the door. I sat in my leather recliner, the one splurge I had allowed myself. I poured a glass of whiskey. I looked out the window at the street below. I could see the snow falling, covering the tracks of my truck, covering the mess of the last 6 months. I had $1 million, mostly, in the bank. I owned 2 houses. I had a job I didn't need but kept because it kept me honest. I picked up the photocopy of the ticket. Lucky sevens. It wasn't luck. Luck is winning a car you didn't earn. Luck is getting a degree you didn't study for. This was torque. This was leverage. This was taking a rusted bolt and applying enough pressure until it finally, screaming, broke free. I took a sip of whiskey. The year was ending, and for the first time in my life, the balance sheet was positive.